The morning light slid through the blinds. But it didn't bring warmth. I pushed myself up slowly, leaning on my cane until the ache in my hip settled enough for me to stand. My steps echoed in the small kitchen, a hollow sound in a house that once carried laughter. I opened the refrigerator out of habit, though I already knew what I'd find. Empty shelves, a faint smell of nothingness, and the reminder that I hadn't eaten a proper meal in 3 days. On the counter sat the only things left: a half-empty bag of rice and a jar of instant coffee. I poured water into the kettle, watching the steam rise, pretending it might fill the room with comfort, but my body reminded me otherwise. My stomach growled, sharp and insistent, as if mocking the silence that surrounded me. Selena's voice returned to me, sharp as a blade. She had come 2 days ago, swept in like a storm, and without a word snatched the pension check I'd been saving for groceries. "Disabled old woman, you don't need much." She sneered as if my survival were nothing more than a nuisance. Her perfume lingered long after she left, clinging to the air, a cruel echo of the daughter I once raised with such hope. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. My cane trembled in my hand, though not just from weakness. Hunger gnawed at me, but it was the humiliation that truly burned. I had given her everything, worked myself raw through long nights, yet here I stood, treated as if I were nothing but an obstacle. Still, beneath the ache, a flicker of something stirred. I would not collapse in front of her cruelty. I would not let her believe she had broken me. I sipped the bitter coffee, staring at the quiet kitchen, and thought back to the day that had changed everything. I still remember the weight of those hospital nights, when I was in my early 60s and worked every extra shift they offered. The pay was modest, but it kept the lights on, the mortgage paid, and left a little to help Selena with whatever she claimed she needed. My body ached constantly back then, though I told myself it was temporary, that once she was stable in her own life, I would finally rest. It was raining the night everything shifted. I had stayed late to cover for a younger aide who wanted to be home with her children. By the time I stepped outside, the streets were slick with water, the street lamps glowing like halos on the pavement. I held my thin jacket tight and hurried across the intersection, eager to get back to the small apartment where Selena and I still lived together. The headlights came too fast, a blare of horn, a rush of air, and then a crack like thunder as the car struck me. I woke days later in the very hospital where I had given so many years of my life, my leg bound, my hip fractured, my body no longer mine. The doctors told me walking would never be the same. Pain would be constant, mobility limited. I expected tears or comfort from Selena, but when she came to see me, her face was tight, her words sharper than the pain in my bones. "How could you be so careless? You can't even take care of yourself. Now you're useless." She said it flatly, as if my injury was an inconvenience she couldn't forgive. Those words cut deeper than the accident. The car had taken my strength, but her voice stripped me of something more vital. It was the moment I realized that my daughter's love had limits. When I finally returned home with my cane and bruises, the house no longer felt safe. It felt like the accident had not only broken my body, it had exposed the hollow space between us. And in the years that followed, her coldness only grew sharper. Sometimes the memories come back to me in fragments, as if they are stitched into the fabric of my bones. I see myself younger, shoulders strong, hands raw from scrubbing, folding, lifting. There were nights when I worked 2 shifts back to back, leaving the hospital only to clean offices downtown until dawn. I would tiptoe into our small home, careful not to wake Selena, and leave a plate of food by her bedside so she'd have breakfast before school. More often than not, I skipped my own meals so she would never know hunger. I remember sewing her first prom dress on an old machine that groaned with every stitch. The fabric was secondhand, but I transformed it into something she wore proudly. Spinning in front of the mirror as if she were royalty, her smile was worth every ache in my wrists. I remember birthday cakes pulled from the oven after 12-hour days. The kitchen filled with the sweet smell of sugar and exhaustion, and her laughter echoing through the small apartment. Those were the years I believed sacrifice was another word for love. I told myself she would grow up understanding, grateful for all that I had given, but gratitude never came. Now, when she looks at me, it is not with love, but calculation. You owe me. She spat the other night when I hesitated before handing her the rest of my pension. Without me, you'd already be in a nursing home. Her words carried the weight of chains, binding me with guilt. My fingers tightened around the cane at my side, its wood slick with the sweat of my hand. Despair washed over me, heavy and relentless. But beneath it, something else stirred anger, low and steady, rising like a tide I could no longer hold back. The silence between us that night felt final, as if something sacred had been shattered. And the very next day, she came demanding more. The slam of the front door rattled through the walls, and before I could rise from my chair, Selena's voice filled the room like a storm breaking. I need the deed to this house. She didn't even sit down, just stood there with her arms crossed, tapping her foot like I was late on some payment I'd never agreed to make. I gripped my cane, grounding myself against the wave of panic rising in my chest. This house is mine, I said softly. It's all I have left. Selena rolled her eyes. You don't need it. You can barely climb the porch steps. You'd be better off selling and moving into a care home. At least then someone would feed you. Her words landed heavier than any blow. This house was more than wood and shingles. It was the last piece of stability I owned. I had fought for it. Brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck, and even through my accident, I had held on to it. To lose it would be to lose myself. I shook my head, my voice firmer than I expected. I won't give it to you. Selena. Her face darkened, eyes narrowing as though I had just betrayed her. She moved closer, lowering her tone, but not her venom. You'll regret this, old woman. Through the window, I saw shadows move across the street. Two neighbors lingered on their porches, their heads turning toward the sound of Selena's shouting. For a moment, I thought someone might come over, might knock and ask if I was all right. But instead, they looked away, busying themselves with mailboxes or watering cans, as if my pain were invisible, as if my humiliation belonged only to me. Selena grabbed her purse and stormed out, the slam of the door echoing once more. The silence that followed pressed down heavier than her insults, a silence filled with the certainty that she would be back. And when she returned, I knew she would want more than words. After Selena left that day, the silence in the house pressed against my ears like a weight. I sat at the table, my cane leaning against the chair, and stared at the empty surface. My chest ached, not just from hunger, but from the realization that my own daughter would never stop until I had nothing left. For the first time, I allowed myself to think that I might not be able to endure this quietly any longer. I reached for the drawer where I kept an old spiral notebook, its cover worn and edges curling from years of being pushed aside. It had once held grocery lists and reminders, but now it would serve a different purpose. I opened it to a clean page, my hand trembling as I held the pen. Slowly, carefully, I began to write. I wrote the date of the first time Selena raised her voice and called me useless. I wrote the day she emptied my refrigerator and left me without food. I wrote about the bruises on my arm from when she shoved me against the counter in anger, pressing my sleeve over the mark so no one would see. Line after line, memory after memory. I let the words spill out, my pain captured in ink. The more I wrote, the steadier my hand became. Each entry was proof that I still had a voice, even if I couldn't raise it aloud. Each sentence was a thread stitching back the dignity she tried to tear from me. When the page filled, I turned to the next, and the next, until the notebook no longer felt like paper, but a shield. When I finished, I closed it carefully and slipped from my chair, lowering myself to the floor. My joints protested, but I pressed on, prying up a loose floorboard in the corner of the living room. Beneath the wood, in the hollow dark, I placed the notebook as if it were treasure. I whispered into the emptiness, "If she takes everything, she won't take my truth." Sliding the board back into place, I leaned on my cane and pulled myself upright. My body was frail, but my spirit felt steadier than it had in years. That night, I went to bed hungry, but not defeated. For the first time, I held something Selena could never take from me, and soon, I would need to decide who I could trust with it. I had grown used to moving through my days unnoticed, but Iris Callahan was not the kind of woman to let silence sit where something was clearly wrong. That morning, as I sat on the porch steps with my cane resting across my lap, she walked over carrying a basket of lemons from her tree. Her sharp eyes scanned my face before she even spoke. "You look pale, Evelina." "When was the last time you ate something decent?" she asked, setting the basket down beside me. I forced a smile. "I'm fine, Iris. Just tired." She shook her head, her gray curls bouncing. "Don't lie to me. I've heard the shouting, and I see the way you move like you're afraid of breaking." Her words cut through the wall I had built around myself. I looked down at my trembling hands. Ashamed, the notebook hidden under the floorboard weighed heavily on my mind. At last, the truth slipped out in a whisper. "It's Selena. She takes my pension, empties the cupboards, calls me names I don't deserve. Last week she tried to take the deed to my house. For a moment, Iris said nothing. Then she laid her hand gently over mine. "This isn't weakness, Evelina. This is abuse, and abuse leaves evidence. You don't have to endure this alone." Tears burned my eyes, but there was relief in hearing the words spoken aloud. Abuse, a name for the suffering I had been carrying in silence. Iris leaned closer. "I know someone who can help. Her name is Marisol Vega. She works with women and seniors who've been mistreated. She'll explain your rights and what can be done." That afternoon, Iris introduced me to Marisol in her living room over cups of coffee. Marisol was younger, with a calm voice that carried authority. She listened without judgment as I explained what Selena had done, nodding with quiet understanding. "You've already taken the first step," she said. "If you've kept records, if you can show proof, we can protect you your pension, your house, your safety." I felt both lighter and heavier in the same moment. Relief at finally being heard. Fear at what it meant. Protecting myself meant exposing my daughter. That night, I lay awake, the notebook hidden beneath the floorboards like a heartbeat beneath the house, and wondered if I had the strength to go through with it. Selena returned late in the evening, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as though to announce her mood before she even spoke. She didn't waste time on greetings. "I'm done playing nice. Mother, either you sign the deed over to me, or I'm gone. Don't expect me to come back and check on you." I leaned heavier on my cane, steadying myself against the sting of her words. "This is my home, Selena. It's all I have." Her mouth twisted into a sneer. "Sell it. Move to assisted living. No one wants a broken woman rattling around in an old house. You think anyone cares if you starve here? You're nothing but dead weight." The cruelty in her voice pierced deeper than any wound I'd carried from my accident. For a moment, fear rushed through me, fear of being abandoned, of being left to collapse in this house without anyone to notice. But then the fear gave way to something steadier. I tightened my grip on the cane, holding it across my lap as if it were a shield. I didn't argue with her. I didn't beg. I let her spit her venom. Let her circle me like a vulture, convinced I was already gone. Inside, though, I felt a quiet resolve building. Every insult, every threat, every time she reached for what wasn't hers, I had recorded it all. She thought she was breaking me down to dust, but she didn't see what I had hidden under the floorboards. She didn't know that her words, her cruelty, her greed were already being turned into the very proof that would stop her. Selena grabbed her purse, muttering that she would be back for my answer. The door slammed, and silence settled in her place. I touched the cane to the floor, rose slowly, and went to check on the notebook. The evidence was nearly complete, and the time for silence was almost over. I waited until I was certain Selena wouldn't return before crossing the street to Iris's house, the notebook pressed tightly against my chest under my coat. Inside, Marisol was already waiting, her briefcase resting on the coffee table, her expression calm but firm. I sat down slowly, placing the notebook before her like an offering. "This is everything," I said, my voice low. "Dates, words, bruises, the money she's taken. I've written it all down." Marisol opened the worn cover with care, scanning the pages. She nodded as she read, her pen moving swiftly to underline key entries. "This is powerful. Evelina, written records are strong evidence. And if your neighbors are willing to testify about what they've seen and heard, that strengthens your case." Iris handed her a small folder. "2 of us have signed statements already. We've heard enough shouting to know what's happening." Marisol looked at me. "With this notebook, the statements, and your bank records, we can show a pattern of financial exploitation and emotional abuse. The court can protect your pension, and the deed to your house can be secured so she cannot touch it." Hearing the words spoken aloud sent a shiver through me. For so long, I had believed myself powerless, reduced to silence in my own home. Yet here were women who not only believed me but stood ready to fight beside me. Selena thought I was broken, too weak to resist. She thought my silence was surrender. But as I signed the forms Marisol placed before me, I felt a strength return I hadn't known in years. When I left Iris's house that evening, the air felt sharper, clearer. My steps were still slow, my cane still necessary, but each one carried a new weight of certainty. I had begun to carve out a path toward protection, toward reclaiming what was mine. Back in my own home, I slipped the notebook under the floorboard once more, though now it felt less like a secret and more like a weapon waiting to be drawn. Selena would never see it coming. They came in the afternoon, just as Selena stormed through my front door demanding the deed again. Marisol arrived with 2 social workers and an officer in plain clothes. Their voices were calm but firm as they laid the papers on the table. "Selena Marlowe," Marisol said, her tone unwavering. "We have documented evidence of financial exploitation and elder abuse. This includes written records, bank withdrawals, and sworn witness statements, effective immediately. Legal protections have been filed to secure your mother's pension and property." Selena froze, her mouth slightly open as the words sank in. For once, she had nothing sharp to fling back. Her eyes darted to me, searching for weakness, but I did not speak. I simply stood there, my cane steady beneath my hand, watching the disbelief spread across her face. Neighbors gathered at the edge of the yard, drawn by the presence of officials. Faces I had seen avert their eyes now lingered, their silence broken by curiosity, even sympathy. They had heard her insults, ignored my shame, and now they saw the truth laid bare. Selena tried to protest, her voice shrill. This is ridiculous. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying. But Marisol lifted the notebook from her bag and opened it to a page marked with dates and details. The officer leaned forward, his expression serious. Your mother knew exactly what she was recording, he said. Selena's face drained of color. For the first time, she looked small, cornered by the very silence she had mocked. I said nothing. I didn't need to. My silence was no longer surrender. It was strength. As the officials led her outside for further questioning, I lowered myself into my chair, the weight of years pressing down, but a different weight lifting away. For the first time in so long, the house felt like it belonged to me again. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a simple meal before me: bread, cheese, a bowl of warm soup. The same kitchen that had echoed with emptiness now carried the soft comfort of being mine again. I ate slowly, letting each bite settle. No longer rushing to stretch what little I had, the walls around me felt different, as though they had absorbed the weight of the confrontation and exhaled relief. My house was safe. My pension was protected, and for the first time in years, I no longer feared the sound of the front door opening. I thought back to the nights I had endured hunger, to the cruel words that had left deeper marks than the accident that changed my body. Selena's voice still lingered in memory, calling me useless, broken, a burden. But tonight, those words held no power. They were only echoes fading into the corners of the past. Silence had been my companion through it all. She thought it meant weakness, that my quiet was the sign of a woman too broken to resist. But silence was my shield, the cover under which I gathered strength, wrote my truths, and waited for the right moment to speak without raising my voice. I reached for the notebook, pulling it from the floorboard where it had hidden like a secret heartbeat. Flipping to a blank page, I picked up the pen. My hand steadier now, I wrote a single line, pressing the words deep into the paper. They called me a disabled old woman, but I was never powerless. I closed the notebook gently, set it beside my plate, and let the quiet return not as a prison, but as peace.